Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Invincible, Season 2, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I was quite surprised by the structure of this episode, because at first, the way the episode started, I wouldn't have thought like, oh, we're doing an Alan thing. And then even the Alan thing is like, half the episode, and then I was like, oh, so that's so interesting, because at first I was like, oh, this is an Alan the Alien episode, just like the Adam Eve special, but it's like, no, it's only half the episode, and then the other half of the episode kind of brings us back to Earth. But either way, I like what we start off, because Mark is, well, you know what, let's start off with the Earth-based stuff first. Well, we have Mark going to college. And, you know, it's like, right, his mom didn't really get to spend a lot of time with him before we jump into this whole... I mean, we have no how much time has passed. You'd assume it's probably been like a couple weeks or something like that in between last episode and this episode because of everything. But it's like, I don't know, maybe more time or less time has passed than I thought. Because it is like immediately, like the moment Mark gets there, it's time for like college to basically start fairly soon anyway. But... it's just, this is going to be kind of a sad time for Debbie, because she's trying to be like, oh, everything's fine. You go on, you know, anger or sadness depression is part of the, like, you know, the whole, you know, it's part of the process, which even Mark's kind of like, I know, because obviously he's going through it himself. So he's probably read like grief books and stuff about like what you're supposed to be going through. Or maybe he read it not necessarily for himself, but because he wanted to understand what Debbie was going through. But it is kind of sad because like with Mark gone, she has a house to herself, and it's just like, it's already hard enough them both still living there, but now it's like Mark has to go off because she wants him to live his life, and she doesn't want him to feel like he has to be stagnant for her sake. So she wants him to go off and enjoy his life, figure stuff out, not as Invincible, but figure stuff out about who you want to be and what you're going to do as Mark Grayson, you know? Because ever since becoming Invincible, he hasn't really taken time to be Mark Grayson a lot. He's just been Invincible most of the time, and because that's all he ever wanted was to be like his dad. And I think that's such an interesting duality of the superhero conundrum of balancing your secret identity life with your superhero life. And Mark hasn't really, I mean, he was juggling it a little bit last season, but he still spent more time as Invincible than he did as Mark Grayson, because, like I said, because that's what he wanted. But now it's like finding that middle ground, you know, because he even tried to still throw himself into his work as Invincible, so he doesn't think about things, so he doesn't have to feel the feelings he's going through. And now, you know, Debbie ends up calling a support group, which we'll stay on Debbie's storyline really quickly. She ends up going, it is a support group. Carol, interestingly enough, is voiced by Leah Thompson. I was like, oh, that's super dope. I don't know what else she's done superhero related wise, but I know she directed, I know there's at least one episode of Stargirl she directed. She might have directed more. I don't know, like, whether she directed anything else, like on a more like if she directed anything on Arrowverse, but I distinctly remember she directed maybe the season premiere of Stargirl, season 2 premiere of Stargirl, or maybe she directed multiple episodes. I don't remember, but I distinctly remember at least one episode of Stargirl she directed. I just don't remember which one it was, but I'm pretty sure it was something in season 2. Maybe it was actually, no, it might have actually been something in season 1. Because I remember it was like, because it was like a Zoom during like when they were still doing the fandom. It was like a between her and the actors talking about stuff. But either way, tangents and all that aside. But yeah, it's a superhero support group. Because at first, me, as well as everyone else, was worried like, oh God, this storyline, Olga got a lot of help out of it. What about Debbie? Is this going to be a cult thing? No, it is legitimately a support group. And then Debbie is just... obviously, she didn't talk much in the first opening. One of the ladies there, what's her name, Lucinda, kind of gave her a death stare, which I was immediately like, does she know who Debbie is? Because they're not supposed to use last names. There's supposed to be a level of anonymity with it. So you try to keep as little details as possible. So like everyone just goes by their first name. But I thought that lady knew who Debbie was. But she ends up talking to a dude, Theo, voiced by David Diggs. So they're talking, and we end up finding out that, God, what was her name? It's like, Alana. Oh God, what was her, was it Green Ghost? What was her name? she's the, because they showed her in the recap, but I didn't even correlate it that's how that was going to connect in that regard. I mean, just like last episode, we got the recap with like Aquarius at the beginning, because obviously that ties into the Atlanteans and everything. But that's gut wrenching that Debbie had to find out the person she's connecting with, the person who's making her feel at home, like it's, hey, he's like, I showed up here, I didn't talk the first month, and now they can't get me to shut up. The first person she really connects with from this group is the spouse, it's a significant other of one of Nolan's victims. It's like, damn, that Debbie can't catch a break, dude. And the fact of the matter is, she ended up telling Theo, and it is the thing of, hey, maybe you shouldn't show up at support group anymore. That's just a horrible thing. But there's a real life element to that, which makes it so much more heartbreaking and gut wrenching, is because it's just saying it's Nolan. It's the literal equivalency, because Nolan is a serial killer. He killed the Guardians of the Globe, along with a lot of people, obviously, when he attacked Earth. But the fact of the matter is, when a spouse or whatever, when their significant others found out to be a serial killer, the question becomes like, well, did you know? How much did you know? How could you not know? You were living with them. It's like he's blaming her, being like, understandable. You're going through your pain. You need to lash out, but it sucks because no one's going to view Debbie as a victim. She had to bottle this up all on her own, and now here's someone blaming her. It's that thing of when you say all these terrible things about yourself, when you feel the way you're feeling terrible about yourself, it cuts even deeper when someone says it. Because Debbie feels like she doesn't have a right to her anger and her sadness, because her relationships did disappear because the man she loved for 20 years turned out to be not only not who she thought he was, but a killer, a terrible human being. He almost killed their son. You'd think that give Debbie some slack too. Like, yes, my son was beaten within an inch of his life by my husband, by his father, but that doesn't change anything because no one cares about the context of the story, because all that matters is, Debbie, your husband killed my significant Elena, like Green Ghost, or so many people, and it's just, it sucks. Because there probably are people, because Olga knows that, and obviously she doesn't harbor any bad feelings against Debbie. I mean, at least not that we've shown. The fact that she wants to reach out to Debbie and gave her this help, it sucks. And that, because that's heartbreaking too, because like Debbie, it goes back to having no one again. It's just gut wrenching, dude. It's just like, come on, man, give Debbie a break. She's a good person. She doesn't deserve this. She is trying her best, and now she has literally no one to talk to and just walking alone. Because when she went to the bar with him, and obviously with these first two episodes, we kind of seen her drinking quite a bit with wine and stuff. Understandable. You're going to want to drink a lot dealing with this. But, and this is why I want to talk about, like, Debbie is different in the show than she is in a comic book in the regards of characterization. This is something I heard about in season 1. I want to say it was the Hero Reforged guys. I heard them talking about this, that where Debbie is in season 1, like her being more of a character in season 1, and obviously like they're developing and continuing that, make that characterization and just creating like a great character with her, because a lot of those, like in those situations, it's easy for the mom character to kind of be a nothing character, but Debbie has so much depth, in especially in the aftermath of everything. But even in season 1, she had urgency, and she still has it now too. Like her story is important, her story is relevant in all of this. But the reason why I'm bringing it up, because I think the Hero Reforged guys, if I'm not mistaken, I could be easily misremembering, but I think they said like where Debbie is in the show, being more of a character, it takes a little while for that to happen. I think she's more of a background, like drunk character. That's why I'm wondering, are they bringing that like alcoholic element to this portion of her story, combining it with all the trauma and pain she's dealing with, and then she dives even deeper and becomes an alcoholic. Like, that's where it seemed like that's where her character kind of was in the beginning, but maybe they're bringing that into the fold of her character development in the show in this regard. Like I said, that's my understanding. I could be remembering or be completely wrong. Once again, I've not read the comics, so I don't know. I'm just picking up information I've picked up here and there from people who are more familiar with the comic. But it just, I could definitely see her going down the alcoholic route and just what that could be. It's just like, man, the $1 million question always is like, is Mark and Debbie going to be okay? You know, and then obviously people who don't want to spoil the comic are just like, you know, it's going to take a while, and some of it gets resolved, but it means some of it doesn't. So what that means, you know, that opens up a million other questions. But that was just kind of such a gut-wrenching thing. It's just like, it's sad that like Debbie she is a victim in all of this too, but it's like, once again, how can you really justify yourself as a victim? Because it's like, right, not only is your husband not dead, he's just gone after he massacred not only some of the greatest heroes on this planet who had significant others, who had lives, who had families of their own, but then you also have the fact is that he killed just, not just heroes, but tons and tons of people during his fight with Mark, purposely murdering so many people just to make a point to Mark. And it's just, she legitimately, you could tell Debbie doesn't feel like she deserves any sympathy. She doesn't think she deserves it. She feels like people keep telling her it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad. She kind of feels like she doesn't deserve it. You can tell, you can feel it. She feels like it should be better spent on other people. She doesn't feel like she has a right to those feelings, when in actuality she has just as much right as anyone else, because like so many of those people, like, it's not a one-to-one, but she is a victim in her own regard, because her entire life was a lie and her life was uprooted. So she is just as much of a victim, and it's just in a different way, but she still is a victim a victim of Nolan's, her and Mark. So we have that. But staying on the Earth side of things, I love that William is trying to, like, he's like, right, laying down the ground rules. Sock on the door, that means I'm hooking up. Go away, fly to like Spain or something, do whatever. Or and if the situation's on the other foot and there's a sock in front of the door, I won't come in either. So we'll kind of respect each other's space like that. And the sad thing is too, like, Mark feels like he has to like let go a little bit, because he's bringing all his collectibles and stuff, and he's got like a seance dog poster, and he's got the toy or the collectible, and he throws them all away, but then he picks back up Sam's. He's like, sorry, buddy, I didn't know what I was thinking. But he thought William was hooking up on the first day, and it's like, who has sex on the first day of college? Amber's like, I don't know, a couple people. Us, for example. Mark's like, wait, us? And it's just so awkward. I love it. It's kind of a cute, awkward, it's like, young and in love, awkward sex versus like The Curse. If you've seen The Curse, like that awkwardness. But either way, what was interesting too is like, I love they played with some of those questions that people have about, like, because Amber's like, right, you're not gonna like crush me or anything. He's like, no, of course I'd never do anything like that. She's like, is your sperm like super or something? He's like, no, I mean, it should be regular. It's stuff like that, because people would have that same conversation about like Superman. It's like, yeah, like, let's not mince words. If like Superman comes inside of Lois Lane, will his cum like shoot through her like bullets? That is a conversation that many people would have, If I'm not mistaken, didn't Spider-Man, I mean, I know the whole joke is, didn't Spider-Man give Mary Jane cancer because his semen is radioactive? Wasn't that a storyline in the comics? I know people have joked about that, but I think it's a joke because it is a real thing in the comics. So it is that thing of like, I think this is the show kind of playing with that a little bit, but Amber's like, no, I'll be on top and stuff like that. So, and even like, she's like, oh, could you turn off the lights? He does it super fast. She's like, how'd you do it? He's like, oh, superpowers, baby. She's like, yeah, don't call me baby. He's like, okay. So they're doing their thing, and I love that the narrator pulls away from that. It's Paul F. Tompkins who voices the narrator, ends up kind of like, oh, let's go away from that. And then later on, Alan, which we'll get to in a little bit, is having his situation with was it Taylor, and it's coming like, oh, let's go back to Mark and Amber. Ooh, they're reaching for the condoms, never mind. Oh, and everyone's having sex. Oh, let's focus on this cat, this pet, this alien pet. And it's like, yeah, there it is, licking itself. If you notice, it has 2 X's, and I'm like, is one of those X's supposed to be genitalia, or is that supposed to represent like, oh no, this thing has 2 buttholes? I don't know how to interpret that. Like, but where it's licking itself, there are 2 X's. I'd assume one of them is a butthole and maybe the other one's genitalia, but I think it'd be funnier to say the thing has 2 buttholes. So I just thought that was so interesting, but let's circle back to Earth stuff, and we'll kind of save the Alan stuff for a little bit. But Amber and Mark, do their thing, and Mark comes back, and William's like, oh my God, give me all the details. And he's like, what about you? It's like, oh, what, me and that guy? Oh, I wish. I'm flattered that you think we hooked up. But it's like, no, I didn't. And I was curious about it because they are going to the same college they went to like check out last season. And William's just kind of like, yeah, I don't really want to be with anyone after the whole Rick thing. And we hear a little bit, because we hadn't heard anything about Rick since episode 6. And it's like, right, Cecil's like, Mark is like, yeah, Cecil said he'll be released in like a month or two, that he's doing better. And it's just kind of like this sad look on their face. And William's like, I'm sorry. And Mark's like, no, it's okay. And there was even this line from William later on when it's like, oh, you need to go help someone. And it's like, Mark's like, why does this matter so much to you? He's like, because the one time you chose not to help someone, we both ended up regretting it. And I was like, that is a sad thing of like, it's, you know, it's just, you compile, like, William wasn't trying to make him feel bad, but it is just a thing of your inaction. There are consequences to your inactions, and innocent people do get hurt. So it's like, if you had jumped on things quicker, maybe you could have said, you know, you could have saved Rick and prevented his current circumstances. But it's also, the fact is, you know, you add in what happened, you know, with Omni-Man, with Mark's fight with Nolan, that whole situation, like, he already felt like he wasn't doing enough, and now it's like, right, there are billions of lives at stake, so I need to help. I love that whole sequence, though, because when Seance Dog showed up, I was like, wait, what's going on here? And then you have the situation of, when it's all said and done, like, Seance Dog was like, oh, I'm from a different dimension, when I'm like, well, we know dimensions are going to be a thing. He's like, yeah, a dimension where, like, dogs and magic are real. And it's like, dogs are real in this dimension. See, he's like, so you're halfway to understanding. I love that it's like, Mark didn't go like, well, dogs are real in this dimension, and so are magic. So it's like, it's not that out of pocket, but for, I guess it's like, it makes sense because Seance Dog specifically is a fictional character, which there's a little bit of meta to that one. It's always interesting when, like, comic book series have comic book related stuff in them, and it's just kind of like, oh, like, once again, it's meant to be meta as it is. But it turns out this Seance Song is not real. It's what's his name, Nuzlocke, or was it Nozlocke, whatever this bug creature is. Also, God, Rob Delaney, I was trying to remember who he was voiced by. But yeah, it comes from a planet. It's like, yeah, my planet's in danger. I need your help. So there are meteors crashing, billions of lives within days. It is interesting, and it's like, oh, we know your name, Mark Grayson. I'm like, why would you know his name? Like, Mark hasn't done enough intergalactically for his name to be out there. But then I also think about, I'm just like, well, Alan's got the whole thing, but that's a very isolated number of people who he told that information to. So how would some other planet know about it? The only, like, space related thing Mark's done other than like interact with Alan was the whole thing on Mars, and that would have never gotten your. So I knew something was a little suspicious, like, this feels like a trap. And so let's continue down the storyline route. We end up showing up on the planet, and lo and behold, who's there? They're like, especially he was like, oh, like, because Mark was like, what is it? I thought all the people were in danger. Where are the meteors? And the guy was like, meteors? What meteors? The ones that were supposed to be killing everyone here? He's like, oh yeah, dementia. I must be forgetting stuff. I'm like, okay, this is a trap. What's going on here? And it's like, oh, meet our majesty. And the person there, the king of this planet, is Nolan, which was a big shock for multiple reasons. I mean, for one, I think no one really expected Nolan to be much in this season. So for him to pop up in the first episode was a shock. But even now it's like, wait, he's in this season period is a shock. Because once again, the conversation I've picked up from people from who are more familiar with the comics, Nolan goes away for a while in the comics. Like, it takes a while before he comes back into the story. But once again, we are talking about, and it's been said, this isn't a one-to-one adaptation of the comic book. They're changing stuff around. They're moving up certain storylines that don't get introduced until later on. So they might be expediting the Nolan storyline. They might be pushing it up a little quicker and expediting that to kind of happen a lot faster than it did in the comic, because they're allowed, because of the format of the show, to tell so many multiple storylines in a single episode. So it's a little different than the format of the comic book, where like you have a certain amount of pages and panels to tell what you need to tell. So maybe that's why they kind of, you know, and it is also, it's kind of the same conversation about the One Piece live action. It's like, One Piece has been going on for over 2 decades. That it's like, now, like, story beats you created later on, you can introduce them in season 1 of the live action, even though you don't cover that till pretty deep into like the anime or manga, because you now have the foresight of like, well, I came up with this later as I was progressing the story. Now that we're doing this adaptation, we can move these story elements up a little faster. It's kind of a similar thing, especially considering, you know, Robert Kirkman is part of the writing group for this show as well. He's not the only one. It is a room of writers, I believe, but, you know, other writers kind of bouncing ideas off about stuff he did and like how they want to go about adapting and stuff like that, right? So that's just kind of that could be just what they're doing here. Or this could be a whole facade and it's not actually Nolan, but it would make so much sense for it to actually be Nolan, that it's like he calls him Mark, and like for them to know about not only Invincible, they called him by his name, Mark Grayson. So you're like, right, that seems like Nolan set this all up, because he's got to keep it very low key. He can't come back to the planet himself, because Cecil's probably got the planet like lined up on up the wazoo to alert them if Nolan comes back to this planet. And then you also, you know, so this is the most inconspicuous way to get Mark away, because, you know, like, oh, Mark wants to help people. He knows that Mark's suffering from the trauma of last season. So it's like, right, he's going to come along if we say like a whole bunch of people are in danger. It's actually interesting really quickly about Cecil. Cecil told him not to go. And he even throws that line at Mark again of like, yeah, your father said, kind of like wanted to do the same thing. And Mark didn't say anything. He's just like, well, I'll talk to you when I get back. And it's just like, the fact is, Cecil wants to give Mark the benefit of the doubt, but it's also like, I can't do that again. I gave Nolan 20-ish years of benefit of the doubt, and look what it cost this planet. I was betrayed by someone I did consider not only an ally, a friend. So he doesn't want to let that happen with Mark. Even though Mark put his life on the line to protect this planet, he still doesn't know if Mark will break bad. I mean, him and Debbie had that whole conversation last episode, but it's still true, because Cecil is the gray area guy of like, I got to do what's best for this planet, and that means keeping Mark on a short leash until like I can properly determine whether or not there's a chance he doesn't break bad like his dad. I mean, to be fair, his dad was always evil. He was just playing hero. But what if Mark decides to just snap one day and become the villain, which obviously he does in most other universes he does. So that's a whole lengthy conversation in itself. And I'm going to circle back to the other Earth stuff. I want to go ahead and focus on the Alan stuff, which we got, you know, a peek and learn more about Alan's people. Obviously, them getting attacked and decimated. Their planet was like conquered in days because they couldn't stand up to the Viltrumites. Even with their technology, they were no match. And some of his people, the Unopas, ended up escaping. They ended up running into the coalition of the planets. Was it Thaddeus, who's voiced by Peter Cullen, was like, oh yeah, because I remember his name being in the credits of like the teaser for season 2. But yeah, he's the head of the coalition. The Unopians ended up engineering people, because that was their way to kind of try and bring back their species. And Alan is special because they tried to like make experiments to create super soldiers essentially, and Alan was the only survivor and successor of all of that. So they put all their hopes in him, but even he can't go toe to toe with the Viltrumite without there being issues. It does beg the question, like, because now in retrospect, now that we know what we know, it's like, why didn't Nolan just kill Alan? It's like, well, him being, you know, an evaluator would have probably gained. It makes sense in retrospect. Alan didn't recognize him as a Viltrumite, so it's like, okay, at the very least, if I kill Alan, other people are going to come here to investigate. The last thing I need is a coalition up in my business. It's like, I can probably conquer them, but it's like, you know, that's more trouble than it's worth. I got to focus on my planet. Plus, you know, by this time, he's probably already with Debbie. They've got Mark. They're building a life together, so he didn't want to. There was duty, but there was also that smidge of humanity that grew inside of him that just, he didn't want to interrupt that unless it was absolutely necessary. So, but either way, Alan comes back to the planet, speaking with Thaddeus and the other council members, which one of them, interestingly enough, is the same species as Battle Beast. But he tells them about Mark and how he's different from his dad, and it's also what Nolan did. Nolan left, and it's like, for them, it's like, okay, this is a weakness we can exploit. So the leader of the coalition, is a lot more willing to listen to Alan, whereas the others had their reservations about Alan's whole, perspective on it, because he's like, no, this kid's a good kid. Like, he could help. He could be the key to turning the tides. Like, because what went down on Earth changes everything. Because even like Viltrumite versus Viltrumite, as the leader of the coalition said, like, yo, we haven't seen this since the Purge, since they originally wiped out half of their planet, only making sure that the strongest are stronger alive, right? So there hasn't been a Viltrumite versus Viltrumite since then, and God knows, because of their lifespan, God knows how long ago that was that they've ever gone toe-to-toe against each other like that. So not only Viltrumite versus Viltrumite, father versus son, the big $1 million question, well, why would Nolan, end up having a child in the first place? Like, and they even, because they really lean into like the Viltrumites are 100% the Nazis in this universe, because they're all about purity. Like, because once again, even though Mark is half human, the Viltrumite blood is so pure, he'll still live for thousands of years, because him being half human, the Viltrumite blood still makes it so that you're practically a pure blood. I don't think Nolan knew that when he was got with Debbie, because he also was probably hoping that Mark's powers never came about, because if Mark's powers came about, it was kind of the excuse to go back to the mission. But having his powers never develop meant like, hey, I never have to focus on my mission, I get to just stay here. Why specifically Mark getting his powers had to jumpstart everything, I don't know. You could have just gone on living your life, but once again, what would he have done if Mark's powers had never developed? Would he have enslaved him like he planned to do the rest of the planet? Who knows? We won't know in this continuity, because that's just not how things played out. But either way, also, Alan gets tasked with finding a mole amongst the council, because one of the planets that the coalition was working with immediately got attacked by the Viltrumites, even though they had just joined the coalition. So him and was it Talia or Telia, also voiced by Tatiana Maslany. There's a lot of voice actors who are playing like smaller bit roles as well as significant characters. Like there's a lot of voice actors getting reused, because she's like played a few characters even so far in the season. But either way, when it's all said and done, Alan's on a date with Talia and gets attacked by like 3 Viltrumites show up. I'm like, yo, did this just fucking happen like this? And yeah, they're like, yo, tell us what happened. Did that person really abandon their post? And Alan, being badass Alan that is, he's looking at Talia. He can tell she's worried. Puts a smile on his face like, no, father, son, who was that? And they beat the shit out of Alan. Alan was getting rocked, dude. I was like, Jesus. They cut off his arm, one of his arms. They literally knocked his eye out of his socket, and then they gave him that good old Viltrumite special, just punching straight through his stomach, and his guts are it's like, holy, I was like, Jesus, Alan, your first time back in the show, and they fucked you up, homie. But then like he's on life support and stuff. I was like, dude, this is rough. And I was like, dude, like who sold him out? I was like, don't tell me it's the Yep, it's the leader of the coalition. He's the traitor. So was this all bullshit from the beginning? Like, what is your deal? Like, are we going to find out you're actually secretly a Viltrumite yourself? Is that what that's going to be? Or is it just you are subservient to him because you're scared? Like, they have you in a vice grip. It's like, if you have to sell out these other people or they're going to come out. Like, maybe it's a thing of, I'm protecting this planet. Yes, I'm putting together this coalition, but it's a front because the Viltrumites want to know, like, oh, who's not falling in the line? Like, this whole thing is a front because the end result will be like, no, we're still falling in line, but I'm creating the illusion. You're able to become, people are a lot more subservient if they think like, okay, we're putting up a fight. It might even be a Viltrumite tactic of, oh no, we want you to think you're going to be able to put up a fight, and then we're going to bitch slap you so hard that you'll be on your knees. You'll never think to like try and fight us again. That could be the tactic too. But yeah, the leader of the coalition like turns off the machine that Alan's hooked up to. It's like, God, I hope someone comes in there to find out about that. I was like, there's no way they're killing off Alan, right? So either he's going to be found out, or either that's part of the plan. Like, either he's doing this because maybe he's not the traitor. Maybe he's doing this to find the mole who's inside the organization by making them think Alan's dead. He's like, I'm sorry when I did this to you. I'm the one that gave you this mission. I put you in this situation, but I'm going to have you pretend to play dead so we can get the real traitor revealed. That could always be the positive. My immediate thought was he's the traitor, but, you know, we'll see if it's going to be that straightforward or whether there's going to be a little more to that. And then finally, there's back to the Earth storyline, which we had the whole Kate and Rex of it all, which was kind of an interesting back and forth. I love that Rex is getting mad. He's like, oh, you cheated on me. She's like, you remember you cheated on Adam Eve with me first. He's like, yeah, but that was then. I was a cheater then. I'm not a cheater now. You know, it's kind of like, she's like, oh, you're such an asshole. He's like, yeah? Why is that news to you? You already, it's kind of like you know, Rex being the douchebag that he is, the immature douche that he is, kind of like, yeah, I'm an asshole. You already knew I was. Like, everyone knows that. It's kind of part of my wonderful charm. But it's also like, you can cheat on your girlfriend, but like now you're getting cheated on by your mistress. It's like, oh, now you're all butthurt. I was like, I can do the cheating, but you can't do the cheating. And even when I did the cheating, that was back then. This is now, you know? And then he also brings up the debate some people have had of like, well, to be fair, he's like 2,000 years old and, you know, that age gap. And she's like, yeah, but you accumulate all the copies of myself I made. Like, we probably lived about the same. I was like, I get it's such an interesting mental gymnastics, like, Kate's trying to go through, because she's trying to justify it, which even she's like, why do I have to justify anything to you, Rex? Leave me alone, you dick. But her like opening up to Rex about why she's with the Immortal, I thought was actually really interesting. For her, it's like, he knows what it's like. He's died multiple times. Because a lot of people, and Rex in particular, even said it in season 1. What did he say? He said, none of them are the real Kate, which Kate said, we all are the real Kate. Because just because she can copy herself doesn't mean they're any less. And once again, it's this interesting juxtaposition between the Muller twins and their whole shtick versus like a duplicate. Because in Kate's case, it's like, when I'm copying myself, we are all Kate. Whereas like the Muller twins had the whole thing of, oh, I'm the original, I'm the clone. So it's a very different dynamic. It's similar, but very different outlooks on their respective circumstances. So for her, like every time like a copy dies, it's like, no, I died. Like we are all, it's kind of interesting, like timing wise, it's kind of like similar. Well, I don't want to spoil something. There's another superhero property that kind of delved into something in its final episode. I'll look at it. Jane's circumstances. If you're familiar with how Jane's circumstances play out in the penultimate episode and the series finale about her circumstances, I don't want to spoil what happens. But if you've seen it, Jane's circumstances, it feels like there's a little bit of a parallel kind of with Kate's circumstances in that regard of like, it's just really interesting. It's just like, no, we are all the real Kate. So when one of us dies, every time I've died over the course of season 1, that was me dying. And God knows she died a lot of times off screen as well. But those deaths still hurt because it's still me dying. It's still us dying because we're all real. We're all Kate. You know, we all have the same memories and everything. Just because we're able to duplicate doesn't change that, you know? Because when she duplicates, they go back to being one person too, so they might be copies, but it's not like a shadow clone situation like in Naruto. But either way, we also had some other relationship stuff between the whole Rudy and. Is this the first time we've heard that Monster Girl's name is Amanda? I don't believe that came up previously because she's always just been referred to as Monster Girl. So I think that's kind of interesting. But Rudy's trying to like conquer his fear. I thought, well, he's talking about using meditation and stuff like that so he doesn't give into his fear response. I initially thought his plan was to completely remove his fear factor of his brain. I thought that's what he was going to do, like straight up remove that part of his brain. Like, oh, so I never have to feel fear. Feeling fear is important. It's a natural response for the human body to tell you like, oh, it gives you self-awareness about circumstances. But even she's like, right, you do what you got to do. Next time you like almost like fall off a cliff or whatever and can't, it's like, right, you got to learn the hard way. Like that it is an important like bodily response. But for Rudy, he's like, yeah, fear has kept me from doing something I really want to do. And that's ask you out on a date. And it's like, okay, and so, well, actually specifically to the movies. He's watched movies, but he's never actually gone out to see one. Understandable considering his circumstances. And then there was also one of the most depressing lines of the episode where it's like, she's like, Monster Girl's like, she's like, I would love to learn or hear about your childhood one day. He's like, well, we're already going to go see a horror movie. I was like, Jesus, Rudy, that's a really dark and depressing line to hear that, you know? But they try to go see a horror movie, but it's R-rated, and it's like, why? And that is the thing of, wait, why does us having a parent here matter? Like, us having parents here really going to have much of an effect on us going to, like, see this movie? But I also understand the Take It Guys thing of, like, yeah, the difference is I don't lose my damn job because of it. So Monster Girl had a woman pretend to be her mom. It's like, oh, yeah, they could go see it. And she's like, what? You want to take a DNA test now or whatever? So they were able to go see the movie. I mean, it's understandable. This is Rudy's first time out, but obviously Monster Girl's had to deal with this for a while, especially considering she's gotten younger and younger as time has gone by. But now they want to go out there and experience some of the other stuff that Rudy's never been able to do. They go to Burger Mart, and he's kind of enjoying everything. He knows how terrible it is, but she's like, nah, come on. Burgers and fries is one of the greatest pleasures in life. So it's kind of cute seeing more of that dynamic, but also getting to see and experience Rudy's normal life, as normal can be for him, because he never got to have that normal life. Because we have no idea how long, because once again, that casing he was in his original body, like being in that tube, yeah, that was never meant to be open. So who knows how long he's been in that tube? Like maybe his entire life, maybe a fraction of, like, who knows? But he's never really been able to live a normal life. So I mean, we don't even know about Rudy's parents and stuff. Like, there's just so much we don't know. I'm curious, like, how much of that will get explored. I'd assume because of his tragic background, you would explore that more. I mean, there's so many of the heroes, like, what about Duplicate? What about Rex? We haven't really dived into their family circumstances. I don't know if someone, like, this was like an accidental spoiler, but there's that dude that's in that prison that the Mauler twins were at, like, that multiplies as well. I heard someone say, I don't know if someone's just making an assumption or whether they know something from the comics, but is that supposed to be Kate's brother? I mean, it's like, you know, it's a very specific ability. So for Kate to have it and that person also have it too. Because we saw them in like one scene in like episode 3 of last season. I don't remember if they've popped up since then, but I don't know. There's just so much background to these characters we haven't really gotten to yet. So I'm really curious to see where all of this ends up taking us. It's a lot. This was a dense episode with so many multiple plot lines and threads. I'd actually skipped over it too. I did like the Amber and Mark of it all. It's like, wait, it's like, yeah, I got to go save some lives, and she's being completely, hey, I understand. This is what I signed up for. Which, once again, I know a lot of people gave her grief. I don't remember my stance on it because it's been that long, but I think I was a little more understanding of Amber's issues with Mark compared to most people. Most people were just like very like, nah, fuck Amber. I was a lot more understanding, like, I understand where she was coming from, because it's like, secret, once again, it's the whole thing of, well, you didn't feel it was important to tell me, like, I was waiting around for you to tell me, and you kind of waited, like, you kept making excuses not to tell me. It's like, I've known for a while. I give it, I might make a whole video about it. I've kind of been going back and forth about it, but either way, people like Amber a little bit more this season rather than last season. I think like I said, I'm more team Amber than like 90% of the internet is. I don't have as much of an issue with her response. I understood where she was coming from perspective-wise last season, but most people don't share that perspective. But either way, but yeah, like, she's more on board with it because it's like, right, it's all out there in the open. It's not like Mark's keeping secrets from her. It's like, no, we're out in the open. You doing your superhero thing. I know what I'm signed up for, and I know we're serious. Whereas before, it's like, I didn't know how you really felt about me. If you're going to like hide a big part of your life, I didn't know how serious we were. It made me feel like I might not be important. Not saying like you can't save lives. I think some people interpret like, oh, saving lives is more like our relationship is more. It's like, no, it's a thing of, no, I just want to be a part of your life. Like, if we're going to be serious, I mean, it's serious to the point that, oh, I want you to meet my parents. I think that speaks volumes of like how serious it is. So if I want you to meet my parents, might be a little more inclined to be like, hey, I should probably tell you I'm a superhero. So, but that's me. Like I said, that's my perspective. But she's like, hey, I understand what I was getting into, so you go save lives and be careful. And him saying, I love you, which, is that the first time he said it? And also, did Amber hear it beforehand? And did she get a chance? She definitely didn't get a chance to say it back. But did she hear it? Because I think it'd be really cute if like he comes back to Earth and she's like, I love you too. It's like, what, you heard that? It's like, yes. Because maybe he'll be worried like, oh, maybe she didn't hear me, maybe she did, and that might be a little bit of, because I've been in that situation, because I've been the person in, because I was a dumb teenager and I said the words I love you. Yes, I was that guy. Yes, cringe. I know. But I was that dude. I was 15, cut me some damn slack. But yes, I said I love you to a girlfriend, and we did that back and forth, cutesy and disgusting, yada, yada, yada. She said, I love you. I thought she said, I love you. So I said, I love you too. So technically, I said I love you first, but that's because I thought she said it first. It's a whole thing, right? Didn't mean I didn't feel it at the time, but it's a whole thing, right? So I'm curious, will they have a little bit of a cutesy, like, awkward thing like that or not? Whatever the case may be. I went even further on my tangents and stuff like that. But either way, I completely forgot to also talk about this. The next episode is going to be the mid-season finale. The season is getting split up. We're getting the second half of the season sometime, I'd assume, early 2024. I don't know if it's just not done yet. I don't know if they're still putting in the final touches on season 2. Or is it just a situation of they're just deciding to space it out like this? But there is going to be a space in between. So it's like, it's a monumental, like, it's like, boom, mid-season finale, and then we're going on a break, and then we'll eventually get the last 4 episodes of the season when it comes back. But so do keep that in mind. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's how they're splitting up this season. So I still don't think there's a date confirmed yet, because maybe, like I said, I don't think they might not be finished. Well, they are working on season 3, so not unless they're still putting on some final touches, but it could just be a thing of, this is just a release schedule that they decided, but I don't know all the reasonings behind it. That's production stuff, is just my speculation, but I did hear that they were already working on season 3, because they had already gotten greenlit for season 2 and 3, so I don't know. Either way, just kind of keeping that in mind. Like I said, so much development in this episode, so many plot threads. I went on my whole diatribe. I do apologize, but I am very, very excited to ultimately see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.